We'll now turn to our second speaker on the opposition, Katerji. Oz is a British-Lebanese, British-Lebanese freelance conflict journalist and a filmmaker. He has previously worked for NBC, Sky News, ITN, and amongst many more. Oz, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of this House, Mr. President, I am a Muslim, I am an Arab, and I am a Democrat. To my core, I am a Democrat. I came here today without preparing remarks, and I'm glad I did, because it's given me the opportunity to respond to some of the things that I've heard. And I want to say that some of the things that I've heard from this dispatch box have been risible to the extreme, have been fundamentally morally misguided. And let me start from the top, right? Mohamed Morsi died in an Egyptian prison as the only democratically elected leader in Egypt's history, the only one, right? So I understand that Muslim democracy might be unappealing to the West. You know, I get it. I am a liberal. You know, I'm not ultra-religious. I believe in a distinction between the church and the state. And for me, Mohamed Morsi was not someone I could support. But I support him as the only democratically elected president in Egypt's history. The only one. And you said that there were two revolutions in Egypt. There was one revolution in Egypt, and then a violent military coup. Right? That's what happened in Egypt. Okay? Egypt today is not a democracy. It is a totalitarian military dictatorship. Right? Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy and a totalitarian dictatorship. Right? I wanted to bring her name now because she's a student. She's a 34-year-old, she's a Saudi student from Leeds University. She's been sentenced to 34 years in prison. Her name is Salma El-Shahab. She had a Twitter account. That was her crime. Right? And we talk about Saudi Arabia as maybe the alternative to this place where we didn't have an uprising there. Look how, are we saying that the basis for progress in our part of the world, you're an Arab, speaking Arab to Arab here, are we saying that progress is just totally dependent on one guy who decides, oh, maybe I'm going to give some democracy here? You had your turn to speak, it's my turn now, okay? The idea that Saudi Arabia can be kind of even compared to any of these societies where they had the bravery, the audacity to say, no, I resist, I exist, I have a voice, I have a right to speak, yeah? Saudi Arabia can't be compared to that. And we had some very beautiful interventions here saying that this was an economic issue, yeah? You cannot compare the life in Saudi Arabia to life in Yemen. You just can't. They're on completely the opposite end of the scale on the Human Development Index in the Middle East, right? I'm not going to compare Saudi Arabia to, you know, the USA, right? But if I'm comparing the Middle Eastern countries, it's just night and day, right? I didn't want to spend time talking about Egypt or I want to talk to you about Syria because I know it's the weakest part and it's what people know me for, right? The Arab Spring in Syria, the revolution in Syria failed. It was abandoned, it was betrayed, it was destroyed. You raised that the liberals who spoke up, they were the first to be slaughtered, right? And you talk about how can there be any progress? How can there be any, you know, how can there be this idea of a democratic society growing overnight post-revolution? Well, what we have here in a Western liberal democracy is we have the freedom of the press, we have an independent judiciary, we have a separation from church and state. We have these things that have been fundamental to our existence for hundreds of years in some cases. Look at this debate society. It's a living, breathing example of that. In the Middle East, we've known nothing but violent dictatorship. From day one to now, nothing but. And for the very first moment in my life as an Arab, in 2011, I saw hope. In my brothers and sisters, I saw hope, right? I have come here, most of my time I spend arguing to the mind, to say, I support intervention in Syria, we should have stopped the Assad regime in 2013. These are arguments of the mind that I had to make. But today I'm talking about the heart. And I, Mr. President, I believe that this House has no right to have this opinion of the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring it's not your business. The Arab Spring is not. The Arab Spring was a representation of the dignity of the Arab people, right? It was our moment to say that yes, we want a liberal democracy. We want to live in a Western democracy, and we have that right, right? And you say, look at the countries that didn't have revolutions. Well, I'm Lebanese. How's Lebanon doing? Seriously, no revolution there. I mean, they call it a revolution. I love those guys, please. I'm not trying to have a go at them, but there was no revolution in Lebanon, right? And I want to tell you a little bit about what I did in the past. This is probably not stuff that's on my Twitter account, stuff that you wouldn't know. But in the early days of the Arab Spring, I was working for one of those EU-funded operations to train Syrian journalists. And Syria didn't have a free media. There was no way to document the atrocities that were happening to them. People didn't even know how to use cameras. So we would smuggle them across the border into Lebanon. We would give them video equipment. We would teach them how to use it. We would teach them how to use VPNs to keep themselves safe on the internet. This was the work that we were doing. And we've been accused of being propagandists or regime change operatives for doing this. I took young men and women who were like me, who had belief that they could turn their country into something beautiful, into something better. And I trained them to just document what was happening to them. Most of those guys are dead now, you know? So when I say, do we regret the Arab Spring? Yeah, it weighs heavily on my soul, what we did, and the naivety that you said, that the Western response, and like this young man over there said, the failure of the West to react to the Arab Spring is not a fault of the Arab Spring. The world was not ready for Arab democracy. Arabs were, and we proved it. And we will prove it again, because the Arab Spring, as you said, is not over, right? And this wave of letting people understand in their hearts that they can have something better, that actually your life's worth is not just a boot in the face, right? And we're going to turn around and say, oh, we regret that. You should have stayed in your place. That way, we in the West would have felt much more comfortable about turning our backs to you, turning our backs on Syria when we should have done something about it, you know? And I'm so glad that we have a Libyan speaker who's going to follow me, who's going to talk about Libya and talk about what difference the intervention in 2011 made, and how Libya has its infrastructure intact. It's not perfect, it's not a democracy, it's got warring parties, it's, you know, it's a broken place. But at least people aren't living in bunkers and caves being bombed by the regime day in, day out, right? Like, that's just a bare incremental difference that might not seem like a lot, but it seems like a lot to the Libyan people. And if you go and ask people in Libya who've lost family members, if they regret this revolution, they don't. If you go and ask Syrians who've lost their entire family, who live, you know, away from Syria, who can't go on holiday, they can't go and visit Syria for 30 days, 5 weeks, just chill out, talk to people. They can't do that. It's not possible. If you ask all of those people who have lost everything, if they regret rising up, every single one of my friends will tell you no, no matter how much they've lost. And if they say no when they were faced with the most extreme violence this world has seen in this century, if they say they don't regret it, then this House has no right to, Mr. President. Thank you very much.